Okay. So hopefully everybody in the Zoom can hear me. I think I unmuted. I hope you can see my screen. Oh, I can hear myself. That's awful. Please. Somebody turn their volume off because, like, I don't even want to listen to me. Somebody right here. All right, somebody fixed it. Thank you. All right, perfect. So apparently most of you got my email since we're full today. That's nice. So the goal is Albert's on his way, by the way. He'll be here probably 15, 20 minutes. So we're gonna go over the solutions from, I meant to send the grades, so I will send the grades after lecture. I can't send them right now because it'll show up there, everybody's grade, and the grades are private. So I will send those at the end of class, so that you'll have them if you want to come speak to me. But I would have to unshare my laptop. We're already in Zoom. Don't want to deal with that. So homework 1 has been graded. You will get your grades, like I said, at the end of class. I'm just going to cover my solutions. If your solutions did not exactly match, that's okay. I don't expect that. Or if you took a little bit different approach, that's fine as well. I'm just giving you the solutions that I have written myself to the homework. So that's really it. Let me find this desktop, great. Question 1 said, create this class and, here are the methods you should have in the class that you're going to create. And then I gave you how the class was going to be used and how I was going to call them, right? So just trying to help you guys out on that. So we have a constructor. The constructor here has a default, accepted default array. That way, even if you didn't pass anything in, you do have this empty array that you can push into, and you won't get errors like tried to push something on undefined. Then I have add group. It's very simple. I decided to go ahead and spread the group objects, and that's so that I could again make members here have a default array, so that I wouldn't encounter any errors or need to do any checking later if somebody were to pass in an empty group. So if I were to try to splice on an empty group or push on an empty group, it would already be empty. It would be here as an array and it wouldn't be set to undefined. That wasn't required. Like I said, just giving you my interpretation. If I asked to remove a group, I was going to pass you a name. My example did include this lowercase name of Avengers right here. My approach was to go ahead and find the index and remove the group by splicing it from the array. So I use the find index method on arrays. I say, hey, let's lowercase the group name, and then let's also lowercase the name that you're passing in. That way, as long as the 2 strings match, we'll find an index. Find index, a lot of you did use this, but then you didn't make this check right here. So if you find something in the group, then you'll get an index. You'll get 0 through the length of the group. If you don't find something, find index will return -1. So I want to make this check because if I were to try to splice and my index was -1, you're just going to remove the last element in the array, which means you've essentially remove something you shouldn't have removed from the group. So you needed to make this check. I have this commented out because this is probably one of the better ways to do this is use filter. I think a couple of people in here used filter. That was great. I appreciate those people who did. You clearly have a little bit more JavaScript behind you. And this just says, hey, let's find a group. Let's filter all the groups out where the names are not equal. So this is going to return you a new array that basically is missing the one from that you're trying to remove. It's a different approach. You didn't have to use that approach. I'll comment that out. Here you can add a member to the group. We need to find the group that you're trying to add the member to. If you do find that group, go ahead and push that member in. Remove member is very similar to remove group, except you need to find index twice. First, you have to find the group that you're trying to remove the member from. Then you have to find the member in that group. And again, you should be lowercasing the name here because as I gave you in the example, Spider-Man is camel cased. Up here, he was not camel cased. So if we truly want to remove Spider-Man, we need to be comparing that on a string to string level of lowercasing or uppercasing. Some people chose uppercase, that's fine too, no big deal. And then finally, to print the groups, the homework said, all of these were functions, and then you can see this one right here. This doesn't have the brackets around it, so I was looking for people to use the get print. We talked about this in class, and you even see here that I call print not using the brackets, right? So if you made print a method and you used, you didn't make it a get method, you just had the brackets around it, this really didn't execute, and so that was causing some problems, so you lost a little bit of points there. Not too many points, I don't think. Can't remember, but anyway. And so then this is what your output would look like. Next one is pretty straightforward. This one was really easy, and it wasn't meant to be a trick. It was just meant for you to use what we learned in class. The two things we talked about that day were object destructuring and template strings. So in order to get full credit for just printing something that is very easy to print, you needed to use both of those. I literally said this twice. If you did not use object destructuring or template strings, you lost credit or partial credit. So you can see here, I destructure in the argument of first and last. I use a template string to then print first and last. That was required. It was mentioned in there twice. You would have lost points. I'm not going to give you those points back. Please don't ask me. Sorry. Next is to combine the keys. So the idea is to take an object, take an array of string, and then take a string, and to combine the keys. This was my approach, was to loop through every key given. If that key that is given is in this object here, then go ahead and then come inside the if statement here. See if we have already created that new key. So did we create something that is already person dot whatever you passed in here? If we did have that, then go ahead and do the appending. Right here you can see that, well, it's terrible when I highlight, but you can see that it's plus minus. I'm appending strings to that new key. If it does not exist yet, then just simply set it equal to that, and then go ahead and remove the other one from the object. A lot of people hard-coded indices, hard-coded name, hard-coded first and last. You lost points if you did that. And here you can see that, my solution, I made it a little bit more robust, made this object a little bit more robust. And if I were to print this out, oops. Oh, where am I at? CD week 4? Nope, 3. Solutions. So here, if I were to print that out, you can see the name contains all 3, right? I looped that array and kept appending to the name. So I didn't hard code anything in here. So I can change this array dynamically, and I could even change this key dynamically here. So if I wanted to run this again, you can see all this is very dynamic. So whatever I pass in is what it's combining into the new key. If I had hard-coded first, last name, or if I'd hard-coded other parts of the object, like some people hard-coded Twitter or company, then my object would be missing things like city and state, right? So don't hard-code things. Your job is not to make one solution for one problem. It's to solve it for every problem. And the last one is create an object. So the idea here is to create this object. This is one object right there, the whole thing. And inside of that object, it has nested objects. So this one object contains 2 nested objects inside of it. So you want to loop through the array that you're given. You're given a 2D array. So you want to loop through the array. You're going to create a new a key. That key is going to be the index plus 1. And then you're going to append values to the key. I did some destructuring here just to make it simple on myself. You didn't have to do that. And I also didn't take off any points if you started at 0. As long as you got this structure correct, an object with two nested objects inside of it. If you had two different objects, or if you had an array, or you had an object with an array that had other objects, I mean, there was a lot of different things, or you had strings, you lost some credit for that because that's not what the homework was asking for. It was asking to create an object. So like I said, I'll send the grades out later, or as soon as I can unplug and do that privately so that nobody sees anybody else's grades. I will send those out, and if you have any questions about that, feel free to speak with me or Albert. Probably me is a little bit more appropriate since I graded it. All right, so that's that. All right, so today, as I said on Slack and in the email, our goal is to cover a couple of new concepts, but also talk about the midterm. So if you go to CSNS, not CSNS, sorry, go to the GitHub, you go to, the GitHub right here. This is I posted the midterm. Some of you may have seen this already if you were looking at the GitHub. We'll go over this in more detail. I posted this just so you could, as we're going through the lecture, you can sort of match up the lecture today with what the midterm is asking. But please don't spend all lecture figuring out your groups and figuring out your API, because you're gonna miss everything that you should actually be doing in your midterm. So idea is that, like I said, we'll go over this in details, but really the lecture is gonna focus on, a little bit of what Albert talked about last week, creating custom modules, right? You've already done that, you had a lab assignment for that. We're gonna expand on that. And then the new topic is creating a command line interface so that you can interact with your custom module. If you want to take a look at that, that's fine. We will go over this in detail, and we'll talk about the midterm, and I'll answer any questions you may have in more detail post-lecture, post-examples. But if you want to just take a peek so that you can make little check boxes and notes as we're going through lectures and slides and examples, feel free. And it is going to be on 3/25, so this is actually most of your midterm. This is a week before spring break, so it's 3/25, then you would have all your other midterms that week, and then you would be on spring break next week. So everybody should be here, because if you're not here on 3/25, then you're probably missing every midterm that entire week, which that's probably a lot of makeup work that you guys are doing. So I can't imagine people are not here on 3/25. So we actually have this a week early so that you can go on spring break on Friday and Saturday instead of waiting until Monday to do that, right? So I thought that was kind of nice of us. Maybe not.
I guess spring break is before the midterm?
After the midterm. So 3/25 is the Sunday. And from what my understanding is, most professors that I've seen their schedules have post-3 that week, so that's Sunday. Most professors have their midterms in that week from 3/25 till, I don't know, what, 3:30-ish, right? And then the beginning of April, I believe, is the week of spring break. And so we pushed the midterm up to 3/25. That way you wouldn't be like taking midterms, have to come to class on Sunday, and then go on spring break. So if you're done with classes on Friday or Thursday, there will probably, we'll have class, but at least it won't be a midterm that you're missing. You can just look at the lectures or whatever. Right?
So 1 week before the actual.
Right, 1 week before the actual spring break, so that there's really no, if you're not here 3/25, then you literally would have probably missed every midterm coming up, right? That's the idea. Yes?
The spring break is from 26th to April 1st.
Is it? They told me that it was not, so I don't know. 26 from April. Okay, then we'll rework that. Maybe we'll do it after the midterm then, because I was told that the spring break, I don't remember who told me, because I didn't look it up, was the first week in April, and not the end of March. We'll figure that out. I don't want you to have to worry about your spring break. I know everybody wants to go on spring break. It's fine. We'll figure it out, but it may be then, was it April 1st? What's the Sunday after April 1st?
April 8th.
April 8th? So maybe April 8th then is what we'll do. That way you have 2 weeks, you can go on spring break, and then you're back anyway, right? So I'll work that out with Albert when he gets here. But we'll get it settled. Anyways, enough about the midterm. let's get to the notes and the lecture. Like I said, have plenty of time for the midterm, plenty of time to discuss it. So the idea of what we're going to be talking about today is taking everything you've learned in the past 5 weeks, today is week 6, and starting to apply that to some more real world scenarios or some real applications. So we're going to be looking at Node command line interfaces, and we're going to be looking at APIs. And last week when Albert did his lecture, you worked a little bit with the API, right? You made a request to his website and you got a response back. I mean, that's not a very robust API, but it is an API nonetheless. So we're going to expand on that knowledge. We're going to use both of those things. And that's going to be, as you saw in the midterm, if you're peeking at the midterm file, that's going to sort of be what your midterm is about, our command line interfaces and APIs. So that's why we're talking about that today. So what are command line interfaces? Hopefully you're a little bit familiar with this. They are programs designed to be used in the terminal and command prompts, right? They usually accept some sort of arguments or options, oftentimes referred to as flags. You probably have already used these, or I know you have because you've been using NPM, right? And that is indeed a command line interface. So if I do npm help, you can see I get all the commands that are available to me, right? So you're already using command line interfaces sort of already in your everyday life. If you're really using get a lot, there is a UI to get, just like there's a UI to npm. But if you're using get from the command line, you can see if you do get help, these are all the available commands that you're allowed to use in Git. So this is what we're going to be doing in Node. We're going to be using Node to build a command line interface. So one of the newer things that we're going to talk today about is how we get arguments from what we type in our terminal here to inside of our program. That's key to having command line interfaces, right? The user is going to be typing something and you need to get that user's information and you need to process it in a certain way. So Node does provide a global object called process. We know process is an object because you can see here there is a dot notation on process. So process is an object, and the property in the object that has the command line arguments is called argv. And argv returns an array. The first element in the array is where your node lives, so that is going to be different for everybody. Wherever you've installed Node on your laptop or your desktop, that's going to be the first item in the array. Second item in the array is going to be the file path that you're executing. And then the remaining elements in the array are going to be whatever you've typed in. So just very basically, if we were going to do this, we would see that array and we would see everything that we've typed into that array as well. So we're going to do a quick demo on that real quick. So let me close that. Oh, cool. It's already open. Neat. All right. Great. So I've already uploaded some of these files, or they're just like sort of empty placeholder files on GitHub under week 6. So you can see there's an examples folder. Right now it's all empty, or not empty, but they're just like very placeholdery. And we're going to fill them out during class, and you're going to have access to them. Yes. Hmm?
Your lecture
Oh, I will. I'm not done with that. I will upload that. Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always upload that at the end. For sure, no problem. So you can see if you wanted to just get these empty. They're all empty right now. We're going to fill them out. Not much in those files, but we'll get there. So if we were to look at this is what we talked about. I pasted the notes from the lecture slides into here, where the first element is the executable, second is the file, third is the array. So if we execute this, cd examples, clear. So if I were to say node, my file name is args.js, and I say hello world. You can see that I'm console, what I've console.log. So you can see that that's where my node lives is the first item, user local bin. This is the full file path from users all the way up into the file name. And you can finally see that I have what I'm really maybe interested in, which is the things I've typed, right? I don't really care about the first two things. The user certainly doesn't care about the first two things. So I'm only really caring about hello world. And that's not really helpful for anybody. So, maybe we're trying to build, an application that's like a little quiz application, right? Because you can see that here. Spoiler alert. And so maybe what we want to do is we want to, run our quiz application and say, hey, I want a help command, just like get and npm, they have help commands so that people know how to run your quiz application. And then while you're using your quiz application, you want to say like, well, I want to be quizzed on certain types of operators, maybe, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, whatever your application supports. And then I want to have some min and max values. Maybe you're building it for your little sister, little brother, and they're like kindergarten. They don't know how to add, more than 10 numbers up. So, maybe just building like a little quiz application to help them out. I don't know. So that's fine. So if we were to start doing this, just using process argv here, and we were going to, run this command as is, we need to start getting, parts of the command that only makes sense to us. So right off the top of our heads, we've been using splice lately. I saw most people actually use that in their homework, so this is familiar. So if I just, go ahead and say, well, I want to splice the first two arguments out of the args. I don't really care about those, and I'm never going to need those. So now, let me comment out this so it doesn't double log. So let's make this more real world. So I got operators. We'll say plus minus. Min is 0. 0, and max is 10, right? All right, cool. So now I have an array of everything I actually care about, right? I have everything after, the executable of the file name, after args. Well, now I have to, look into that array, right? I have to figure out all these things the user's asked me for. The user has said, well, I only want to add and subtract numbers between 0 and 10. I don't want to do any more than that. So now we have to start, doing a little bit more. So I could say something like, okay, well, I know since I've already taken that out, I know I'm going to have some sort of command here. And so if I do, args.shift, shift will pull the first element out of the array. I can see what exactly that command is that the user's asking for. What is the first thing the user's asking me for? So if I do that, you can see the second log here is operators. So I can say, hey, okay, well, users asked me for some operators. They want to do some addition, subtraction. Or if I were to do this and help, you can see, well, your users asked me for help. All right, well, cool, we're getting there. So then, maybe the next logical thing for me to do would be like if command equals help, do, what is it, like maybe do display help, else if the user says, hey, command equals operators, do operations, okay. So if I run that now, I'm gonna get some errors because those commands don't exist. So let's just, make some fake little templates here for me. Function and do operations, there it is, okay. So then, we saw those help commands, and so, I don't really want to type a lot, so a lot of logging details, right? That's actually what it would be. So you can see that worked, right? I have a lot of logging details. right? I'm gonna create some long thing like you saw here in get help that tells the user about all my things. That's a lot of work. Now if I have do operations, you know, I got to do even more parsing, because if I were to, you know, pass my args here and pass my args into here, and then just let's console.log args here. We'll get rid of this so we don't have too many logging here. Oops, helps if I spell console. So now I said that I know it's operators, and now I have to even parse this array even more, right? And so as Albert's slide said so gracefully, well, that's, you know, there's got to be an easier way, right? There's got to be an easier way than continually looping through this array and figuring out what our user wants. And lucky for us, there is an easier way. So we're going to close that file, and we're going to be done with, you know, trying to do all that work ourselves, because just like you used request to make requests a little bit easier to get, we're going to start using node modules to make our applications a little bit easier to get. So, you know, keeping in what we're trying to do, if you do npm search, and then you search for, you know, maybe something that helps with command args. You know, you could use the UI to do this. You don't necessarily need to use npm search. You know, I'm just keeping with the trend of CLIs. Then you can see these are all the node modules that npm has, you know, highlighted the actual words that we've searched for. We are in fact going to use this node module called yards. And yards is going to help us parse all these things in a much more easier, concise fashion that's super easy to read. Yes?
How do you make the description column bigger?
The description column? Oh, what do you mean? Which one?
The description column?
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, this was just, I mean, I can make the font size bigger here if needed, but.
No, I mean, like, it gets cut off, so it's like,
Oh,
modern,
that's just the way npm, I believe you could search Explorer pack. I mean, I don't know all the command line arguments for npm, as you know, but you can ask it for help, and it might tell you that it maybe if you passed in long. I'm not sure. Most people probably wouldn't use this. I was just showing you could use this. You could go to the UI as well, but I'm sure there's a way to get the full information. You know, if you were to do npm help and use one of these commands that they so gracefully tell you about here to get more details if you know the name of your module. Yes?
So going forward, like, how do you expect us to figure out which one will best fit our application?
Well, like I said, you could use the command line argument, or hopefully you've already been to this website, right? And you can then see all the packages that you might want. You can then say, you know, have the search criteria best overall. That's what it believes is ranked. You click in here. One of the best ways to determine whether this node module is good is to look at this sort of stats. So 54 million people use this module. I probably feel like it's a solid module. Could be wrong, I don't know. But a lot of people feel like it's solid, so. I would take a look at these stats. There's also a lot of this information up here. This is feeding in from their, there's an API that allows you to build and test your code. And you can see that like the build is passing, the code coverage is very high. It's passing inside of its Windows test. So a lot of these modules that are very like, supported by the community and supported by node developers, they will have a lot of just users, a lot of stars on GitHub, a lot of tests, and a lot of just details and information that you can do. So that's one way to do it. So if you also look at something like Express, that's one of the most popular. Oh, that's not it. Express popularity. Express.js, is that what it is? No. I have 3 S's. That's awesome. So here you can see Express. This
What does
is
it do?
this is probably the most popular server framework for Node. There are others. This is probably the most popular.
Was it Node its own? Isn't that already a server framework?
It is. So like you did with your custom modules, the idea behind people building these modules is to take the core parts of Node and write wrappers around that to make it easier. So like that's what we're going to talk with Yargs, right? So you can see that we could approach, it's not incorrect to write an entire file that processes command line arguments. If you want to do that, I highly encourage you to do that because you'll learn more about Node and the platform and JavaScript as a language. But also if you're looking to use something that's user-friendly and easy to interact with and something that's just quick and up and running, then you would use a wrapper like Yargs. So Yargs wraps process.argv, and what we're gonna see is it makes it really easy, not only for people who are reading our code to see what's happening in there, but also just to quickly build a command line app without having to do too much work ourselves. So hopefully that makes sense and answer your question. Okay, great. Yeah. So we're going to use Yargs. Back to that. So the first thing you're going to want to do inside of any Node application that you're deciding to write. So this is examples. This is quiz app. Okay, great. Is the first thing you're going to want to do is npm init, and this is going to auto create your package.json for you. So you don't have to do that yourself. It's just going to ask you some really quick questions, and it's going to create a package.json file for you. So you can say, hey, your package name is quiz app. Yeah, that sounds good. Version number, yeah, that sounds great. And this is an app for simple math quizzes. I think that's 2 Z's. The entry point, it's if you have JS files in there, it will suggest a JS file in there for you. So it thinks that my entry point is app.js, so I agree with that because it is. If you don't have a JS file in there, it might come up with index.js, or it'll allow you to type whatever, so I'm gonna accept that. We don't have any tests. I'm not gonna push that to get. No keywords, put my name, sure, we'll use MIT license. And then it'll show you what your package.json looks like, right? These are all the things I've typed in just by answering a few questions and mostly hitting enter. And I was like, yep, that looks great. Cool. So now you can see right there it is. There magically is a package.json. I don't have to worry about anything. So that's perfect. That's step 1. Step 2 is I want to install Yarg. So npm install. Let me just make this a little smaller. Okay, so npm install Yargs, and then if I want to make sure that that package goes into my JSON, my package.json, I know that I need that. I know that my application is going to be now dependent on this module. I need to put it in to my package.json. So you probably learned a lot of that last week when you were using your own package.json. So hopefully, you just maybe did this. And you can see now that I did not type that in there, it magically added it in there for me. So just by using the command line interface, I not only installed the module, I had it automatically update my package.json, and I didn't even have to worry about it. Great, so now we can actually use Yargs. So now I can just do what I would normally do, is like that. Now, I happen to know how to use Yargs because I've used it a lot and taught this class with it a lot. Yes.
Why would you never use something like that if you just come up with a GUI or some kind of website?
Well, I mean, just like, why does Git have a command line interface? I mean, I use the Git command line interface because A, I'm often testing my code in the terminal, and when I'm ready to commit, I don't go to the Git GUI. Like I won't say never, but I would say rarely have I ever come in here and hit upload files to upload the files from lecture class. Like I just don't do it. And so to me, it's an ease and convenience to just be able to do it from the command line. So I'm able to git commit my files, I'm able to add a commit message, and I'm able to upload it all from my terminal without ever having to use the GUI. It's a preference, right? Like, and sometimes I just use npm too. Like if I know what I'm kind of searching for and I'm already in my terminal, I don't really want to go to my browser, type in npm.js and then search and then click. Like, you know, it's a preference, but this is, you know, one reason. And we haven't learned about GUIs yet either, so there's also that. So as I said, I know how to use yards, but a lot of you are going to be maybe using modules that you're not so familiar with in the future. Or you're going to, you know, you're gonna not wanna, maybe I do this class demo, you're like, I hate yards, I don't wanna use that one, I wanna use something different. That's fair, I'm not mad, you can do that. But if you don't know how to use that, very, very popular modules like yards typically give you this like table of contents, and they start explaining their APIs. They start explaining how to use the modules. I don't know how to use everything in yards. I know how to use most of it. If you ask me a question, I can probably answer most of them. There might be one that you ask me and I'm just gonna look at the API to answer your question, as you should look at the API to answer your question. Right? That's like asking me something from Wikipedia. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna just Wikipedia that for you guys. Like, you know, so look at these APIs to try to figure out what it is you need to do. If you're trying to do something crazy, we're gonna cover a couple of, you know, unique scenarios in yards today to help you with your lab today and to help you with your midterm. But if it gets to a point where you're trying to do something different in your midterm and you want to do something a little bit more, you know, fancy, please look at the API, because that's pretty much what I would do. I would just stand here and go through the API with you and we would discuss that together. Because I don't, like I said, I haven't memorized every node module's API. But for this one, the idea is we're going back to, you know, what we really want to do is basically somewhere in here. We want to be able to get this command to work, although this is now going to be my my app.js. So instead of args, my file is app.js. So we're going to want to get this file to basically understand operators min and max. And we're going to make a math quiz, right? Simple math quiz. So to use yards, you might want to declare some kind of constant. I'm going to declare it flags. And then now we're in here, we're going to use yards. And one of the methods yards gives you is this method called usage. And usage is going to help your users figure out how to actually use your module. And so you can just start typing in some things. So some of these things I'm typing in are just built-in syntax from yards. So options, by just doing this, it will help display the options that we're eventually going to fill out. And $0 is going to help display your file name and your run command on that. So if you just read the documentation on yards usage, you're going to understand these different syntactical strings that yards parses for you. And we're going to see a different string later today called command inside of yards. So I want to add some options. So yards provides this method called options. And if you're using Visual Studio, it's kind of nice. It does tell you a little bit about what's provided here. So you can see yards options and it tells me what's happening. It's nice. And options is going to accept some names of your options. So we've already talked about that we have, where's my terminal? We already talked about the options we want to have are clearly we want to have operators, min, and max. Right, so we're going to go ahead and start it off with operators. And so that's going to be our option name. That's up to you to decide. You can name your options whatever you want. They're like variable names. They're yours to make. We can alias our options so that the user doesn't have to always type in very long options. You know, maybe the user is super lazy and they only want to type an O to mean operators. So we could alias it to O. We want to describe what's happening inside of this option so that when we display a help, the users kind of understand what we're meaning by this option. So operators are in fact mathematical operators. we're going to want, you can see that we're passing in multiple operators, right? We're passing in a plus and minus, and we could even extend that to be like, multiplication and division. So it seems that since we're passing in many operators, not just one, that we might want to make the operators an array. And so we can tell Yargs that we're really looking for anything after operators to be an array. And then finally, maybe our user just is super lazy and doesn't want to do anything but just run the application. So we can set a default for our user and say, well, hey, the default operation is just gonna be a plus sign. You're just gonna have, your math quiz is only gonna ask you to add some numbers, right? And so then, this is why we talked about chaining. ARGS is one of these libraries that does chaining. So there was a question asked like, why would you do chaining? And it was to help you understand that a lot of node modules follow that concept. And so we're chaining these methods together. So we've chained usage, options, and now there's a method on ARGS called help. And Yargs will, what we're gonna see is by adding this method to Yargs, we're gonna be able to get a nice free help menu. And then the last thing to sort of complete our usage is you must end it in a .argv. That's just the way the library works. I didn't make that up. That's just how this library works. All the examples you'll see here, how they sort of tell you, hey, you should maybe use help and argv. So I'm just using it according to the API. So now if I were to, run this and I were to say node app.js and I say help, it's all there and magical for you, right? I didn't have to console.log a lot of information. All I did was just type a little bit in, and you can see that I now have these options. It tells me it's mathematical operators. It tells me the kind that it's expecting, and it even tells me the default. You get a few other things that argv will append for you. That's the help menu. It'll automatically tell you that's one of the options. And then the version of your node package. It'll also give you that for free as well. So those are just some freebies that the library appends to your help file for you. So just by doing this in 13 lines, I think that would have taken us a lot longer. I mean, we're already at 28 and we haven't even console.log a lot of details, right? So that's kind of why we're using Yargs. So now we can, sort of take this same concept, there's nothing wrong with that. And we know that what we want to do is do a min. Probably shouldn't alias min because min and max both start with M. Don't want to confuse the user. So, min range of numbers. This one's not going to be an array, right? We're just expecting a number. We don't want people to type in an array of numbers. And we're going to say, maybe the minimum is 0. And the same is true here with max. Let's kill the alias, and then we'll say, max range of numbers. And, we'll default that again. We'll just say our default's 10. Make a really easy math quiz. Great, okay. So now we could run help, but this time let's do, we set this variable up here, so this must mean something to us in the future. So let's run flags. So I can do node app operators plus minus, and then I'm going to set my min to 1. Which,
So can I ask you a quick syntactical question?
yes.
In regards to your dot options, when you add them in dot help and dot argv, excuse me, is that being applied to the flags variable, or is it being applied to the yards.usage function?
It's being applied. It's being actually applied to the overall file. So the file understands that because you've required in yards, that's being required into your application. So just by typing in help, it's kind of like you've added, oh, my thing's up there. Help is kind of like what you've added is one of these, right? And so when you execute help, it's like, oh, it's kind of running an option, but it's already built in for you. So this is actually an update to the library. So before you would actually have to add a whole help custom in here option. but now it's built into the library. So just by requiring this in and tacking that on there and executing the file with help, it'll just run that for you.
Do you think like normally the way that we do it in other languages, when we put dot, it gets applied to something? Or you're just saying it just knows that it's applying it to.
Well, it's this because this library does chaining, right? So we talked a little bit about chaining in class. So behind the scenes, what's happening is you've created a new instance of yards, and every time you change something, it's returning this. So it understands everything in the context of your yards. I don't want to say usage because that's used there, but when I say usage, I meant like overall usage, not the method usage, right? So it's understanding that in the entire library context. So it's kind of how JavaScript is just different, I guess, right? So you're behind the scenes, it's returning this on all these things. And so when you do help, it understands the context of the entire application you're chaining here together.
So if like I would not be able to then, I guess, instantiate another variable here because it would just think that it belongs to that.
You would be able to instantiate another, it wouldn't make sense to instantiate another variable because it's sort of like you only have one command line interface for file. There's really not a reason to have two command line interfaces in a singular file. That doesn't, I don't see any benefit for that, especially since these libraries are robust enough that you would build your command line interface to support whatever application, whatever you're trying to do in your application. I'm not exactly sure what would happen if you tried to add 2 yards usage. It probably would double print the help options, which would just be very confusing to the user that you have like 2 CLIs in one file, right? So if we just console, okay, so back to where we're at. If we just console.log flags, since we've set that variable equal up there, we sort of get this our object here that we can now, you know, it's already parsed it for us, right? We don't have to do any work to do any parsing. It was able to say like, oh, I understand that what you meant was the min number is 1, the max number is 100, and you know your operators are in this array here. So if we didn't do any of that, right, we just ran the app as is because we set some defaults, you can see that it would apply our defaults. We have the operators as just the plus sign because that's the default we set. We have min as 0 and max as 10. So what yards does for us is not only does it give us this built-in helper to let users understand how to interact with our CLI, it also allows us to have this like, it parses all of our command line arguments for us, and it applies defaults if the user doesn't pass any defaults in. So we don't have to do a lot of if-else checking to figure out what the user means when they're trying to run our app. We can just say, hey, we'll apply some defaults for you, and you can just run your application as is. So now we've done our command line parsing arguments. Yes?
Sorry, can you go to the terminal real quick? How come in the first one it didn't catch your minus sign for the operator?
Oh, maybe I had too many spaces in there. That's a great question. Well, it may not have caught it because technically you can, so what you could do is this node app, and we said operators, we aliased it, and so the single dash points to an operator. So if I did plus minus, there we go. Well, it understood that. I may need to escape the minus sign. I'll have to look into that. My guess is it has to do with the being able to do this portion here. So the operator -o implied is the alias, and we use 1 dash on aliases. And it's probably expecting some other alias here, and that's not appearing. And so it's parsing it out automatically for me. If I were to do this, Yeah, it just is parsing the thing outside of it. That's interesting. There it goes. Make the default operator minus. Yes.
So, so for the CMI, how are we validating things from the user as arguments? What if the user change like
What do you mean?
direction? Like, how are we validating that the user thinks that it is matching up?
Well, part of it is, well, we haven't got to the validation part yet. We're just console.logging these flags. So yeah, if the user does something like app, JS, you know, hello world, it will parse that for you, you know, automatically, but you don't necessarily have to take any action on that, right? Right, like, I mean, you can type in whatever, but maybe, you know, what I would actually want to do is say like, well, hey, if flags.operator, you know, if flags.operator exists, then take some action here. Otherwise, or operators, yeah. If flags.operators, then take some action here. But if the user types in hello world, like, I don't want to actually do anything else, right? So part of the parsing is that even though it will continually parse these command line arguments for you, like you can see, you can just ignore them. You can allow the user to type whatever, but simply ignore them. There's also a way in yards, if I look at the API docs, I don't know if it says under advanced or not, but there is a function in here that asks for, basically it says, hey, you know, I want you to throw an error if the user types in something that I'm not expecting. I would have to look through these a little bit more. I can do that, and I can add that to the lecture notes a little later, because I'm not sure exactly where that is in there. Right now, we're just going to assume that our user's smart, or, you know, they're not going to try to trick us. All right. So now we've got our parsing done. So we want to start to actually use this to build something, to actually build the math quiz. So I have the quiz.js file. This one's empty, as you can see. And so we're going to build this. All right. So the first thing you might want to do, and like I said, you can approach this anyway. I'm going to approach this with some techniques that we've sort of already learned, and I'm going to use a class to build this quiz function. You don't have to use a class, you know, if you don't want to. It's not required in your midterm or even in the lab today, but I'm going to eventually build a class. I'm going to create this, I'm going to export a function called run, and I'm going to, you know, pass run some options. And before I do that, I'm going to have a class. That class is called quiz. Or this, now it's just an empty class. And so then I could say something like const quiz is a new quiz. And we would pass quiz our options. So our options being, you know, min, max, and operators. And then I'm going to want to, you know, call a function in here to kick off the quiz. So call, we don't have any functions yet, so call function to start quiz. Okay. So now I'm going to want to, you know, start adding some stuff to my quiz class. So we already know we need a constructor. And the constructor, as we already know, is going to take some options. And we already know what those options are because we built a CLI. We already know we have a min, right? The options.min. We already know we have a max. And we already know we have operators, right? Equals this dot operators. You could spread in here, you know, if you wanted. You could, yeah, sorry, I typed that twice. Typed this twice. Okay. So you could spread in here if you wanted, right? You could, if you really wanted, you could do, you know, min, max, and operators, right? And then you could kill all these options. You don't need those anymore. You could do that, right? So that hopefully we'll do that. So that kind of reminds us that spreading is an
How do
option.
you do all this magic?
Not magic. And then we're gonna want, we said we want to make a function to start our quiz. Maybe we call it, you know, start, I don't know, whatever you want to name your function, you can call it start. So that's gonna start our quiz. And so, you know, our quiz should be random, right? So we know we're gonna want to, what we are basically saying is we want to, you know, have a number, a minimum number, and a maximum number, right? And so we want to make the numbers random. And so this is just how you do, one way you do random numbers in JavaScript. Math.random, that's a function, times this dot max plus this dot min. So there's no magic behind this. This is literally like the standard way to do random numbers in JavaScript. Like, it's just a textbook solution. Like, every JavaScript textbook will tell you this is how you do it. I did not make this up. This is not some magical solution that I came up with. Please don't credit that to me. It's just literally the way the textbooks tell you to do it. It's just how it is done. Right, so this is going to give us two numbers. Both these numbers are going to be in between the min and the max, right? It's the same function twice. You know, we want one number, we want two numbers, and we're going to do some operation on those numbers. And then we're going to have an operator, right? And so we're going to have this dot operators. And then since it's a quiz, we don't necessarily know which, you know, if the user passes in like an array of 5 operators or 4 operators or however many operators there are, you know, we want to get a random operator too. So to do that, now we're just getting a random number and an index, right? So we're basically doing the same exact thing. So we could have written a, you know, a helper function so that we didn't have to continually type math.floor, math.random. Yes. Somebody ask a question? Okay, yeah, okay, cool. Random, and then this time what we want is, because we want it to be within the length of the array, right? So we want this dot operators length. I'm going off the page here. Right, so we're trying to, so the reason why we have this random number generator is if we have 4 operators in our array, we just want to pick a random index as the operator. So this is going to say, this is going to generate, you know, something that's, you know, 0 through, you know, whatever, 3 or 4 or however many are in there. And then that's just going to be your operator that's given to you. Oops. So, all right. So then we want to, you know, start building this idea as a question. So now we have these things, right? We have, at this point, we now have 2 random numbers and a random operator. And so we want to, you know, prompt our user. We want to, you know, build a question. Personally, I like putting things in objects. It's just what I do. So I'm going to put all these things into an object so that I can pass just an object around my entire class. So just by doing this dot question, all my methods will have access to this dot question. Right, and then now we need a way to, you know, sort of, you know, display the question. Yes.
Scope of the question.
It's in the scope of the class quiz.
Where is the question there?
It's not. It's using this dot question. So we're inside of a class. So at any time, we don't actually need to declare using this. We don't need to declare. We're just appending the key question into our class. So our entire class will now understand about the question. Yeah. So you don't have to just declare things in your constructor. You can declare. You know, you could add different you know, key value pairs inside of your any method inside of your class, and so your all the functions in your class will now understand what this dot question means. Awesome. Yeah, I thought so too. Now,
One quick question, I'm sorry.
no, that's fine.
The start function you have, is that a built-in JavaScript function? You just
Mm-mm. No, that's, I named that. You could call that anything. You could call that, you know, init or whatever. I just called it start. That's just the name of your function. Yep, whatever you want. So I could just console.log this question, right? Like now I'm at the point where I could console.log my question. But if I do that, then I don't get to show you another module, which is going to be used in the second part of our lab and probably what you're going to need in your midterm. So I'm not going to console.log. I'm going to use a module called inquire. So again, you could go to npm.js, inquire, there we go. So inquire is it's a different type of module. It works, it's built for command line interfaces, and it kind of gives you a very basic GUI in your command line interfaces, right? So what you'll see in inquire is you can, you know, prompt the user for questions. That kind of makes sense because we want to prompt the user for our math question. But it also gives you some other really cool features where you can start creating like checkboxes, and you can start creating these selector lists. You can start creating like true false booleans. So you can see here what some of the things inquire will do. You know, it's asking you, you know, like this is clearly a pizza app via the terminal. And it's asking you what you want to do. Do you want to order a pizza, make a reservations, ask for the hours, or talk to a receptionist? So it's another module that you can use that's already been wrapped around, you know, process argv, and it allows you to sort of interact very dynamically with things going on in your terminal, and it's pretty cool. So we're gonna use that. We're going to go back to our terminal here. So we're going to go npm. I cannot spell inquire to save my life. I don't know why. So npm install inquire -- save. So I'm saving that so that it will be put into my package.json file. Perfect. So it is indeed there. Great.
It's supposed to be written with E, right? Inquire is E or I.
Well, they've spelled it in this way. This is the module I want. Maybe the other inquire was taken. You can only have one module name per thing. So like you cannot create a module called yargs, right? Because it's already taken. So it's, yeah, they're registered by names. It's so that you know what you're getting when you install it. Yeah. So this time I'm going to const inquire equals require inquire. Cool. And so inquire is actually really nice. It has a lot of great examples and documentation in here. It tells you, you know, hey, when you're prompting the user for a question prompt, it'll tell you all the different kinds of things this object will accept, so that you can prompt the user and pass in the different features that you want to your prompt. So again, you know, like I said, I've used inquire a lot. I'm pretty familiar with how to do a lot of the different, you know, basic things. But again, if you're trying to do something a lot more over the top with your midterm, you know, and you want to use inquire, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to. You know, please read the API. And if you do have problems, you can come see me, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'll know the API off the top of my head. So we're going to, you know, display the question. So we're going to say display quiz, right? And this function is just going to be responsible for sort of displaying our quiz here. So you can see if I do inquire.prompt, I'm now trying to prompt the user for a question. So inquire uses promises, and the reason why inquire uses promises is because it has to wait to get the answer until you respond, right? It can't just respond right away. You can't set inquire equal to a variable name. Like you can't just say like, hey, const answer equals this, because the promise is pending. While you're thinking about, you know, what 2 plus 2 is, inquire is just sitting there waiting. So it's in a pending promise state. So keep in mind that inquire uses promises, and so you're going to be using the then method on inquire. So you need to tell inquire, you know, what type of prompt are you wanting? There are lots of types of prompts. There are checkboxes, there's lists, and then there's just the input. You're just expecting a basic input from your user, right? So we're going to use the input type. You can give your answer, your input, a name, right? So you say, well, I want to refer to my input or whatever the user types into the terminal as their answer. I want to refer to that by the variable name answer. You need to, you know, message the user. You know, this is an input. We need to display a question to the user, right? So we're going to use a template string here. And the message that we're going to be asking the user is pretty simple. It's, you know, the question, which is this number, you know, oops.
Let's see.
Right, the message is pretty straightforward, right? All we're asking the user is, hey, what is this? What is like 2 plus 2, or, you know, whatever this operation might be here. We're just saying, hey, what, you know, answer my question for me, and that's what this is. Inquire also takes a filter, and we're going to need to use this. We're going to need to use this filter on our prompt, because when the user types, even though the user is typing a number, it's just like when you type numbers into forms. You have to, the form thinks that whatever you're typing in is a string. And so just like that, you know, the terminal thinks that whatever you're typing in is also a string. And so because of that, we need to go ahead and we need to parse that to an integer. So we need to say, hey, you know, input, you know, so this accepts a filter is a function. And I want you to return whatever the user, you know, inputs. I want you, oops, sorry, parse int on whatever the user returns, right? I want you to make that, turn that into an integer value for me. And so we're only doing, you know, we're only working with integers where we're not working with any decimals, so that's parse int is perfectly fine. And then I said it is a promise, so you're going to need a then, right? And so then you're going to take this input like this, and then you're going to say, you know, we want to know if this solution is right. So we're going to need another function now to figure out if this solution is right. You know, we don't want to really, we're not trying to mix and match our solutions here. So, I mean, our functions here, separation of concerns, right? We don't want to do all the logics for determining if the user is right here. So it's a separation of concerns. So we really need two functions. One function is going to determine if this is right, and the other function is going to get the solution for us here. Right? So, well, let's write get solution first.
Yeah, really compartmentalize this.
I really do like to compartmentalize things. I really am into like separation of concerns. It's like I live for it, you know. It truly is the highlight of my life. So I'm going to use a switch statement, you know, just to show you something different. You could use if else here. There's nothing that says like, hey, you should use a switch statement. So, you know, first thing we need to do is we're going to switch on the operator. Right, so this question operator, we're going to switch on that, and we're going to say, hey, if the operator is a plus sign, then what we do want to do is we want to return this question in 1 plus this question in 2. And then I have another case. Obviously, I have the minus sign. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add that, nothing to there. And then instead of a default, let's, I'll get rid of those guys because I hate semicolons. We'll say, console.log operation not supported. So right now our application really, we only have two cases. We've only really said that we only understand how to add and subtract. So we needed to also understand how to multiply and divide. We'd have to add those cases here, right? Because I have a lot more demos to get through today. And so if you want to be here till like 8, I'll do it. Yeah, it's really, it's really so simple, right? So const solution is going to then be this get solution. And we're going to pass in the question. It needs the whole question there. We don't actually have to pass in the question, but actually let's not because I didn't. Yeah, we don't need to. It's great. And so then, but what we do need to do is this needs to accept an answer. And so then I'm going to, say, this dot is right. Input dot answer. And so, if the answer equals the solution, then yay, you got it right. Else, we'll do console.log wrong, and we'll tell the user the solution. Sure.
Where is the answer? Oh, okay, so as the input. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time.
No, it's fine. I will upload all of the, I will upload the filled in versions as well.
Right now, actually.
Not
right after you finish.
After you finish the entire lecture. Yes.
Are you
Not,
serious?
Yeah.
That's so good. I don't have to.
You don't have to type anymore.
I can just watch it.
You can just watch.
Awesome.
That's, yeah. I'm sure watching me is amazing.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's why I'm here. So I typed a lot of code. I have no idea, to be honest, if this is going to work. That's just the plain. I have, no one should type. As a fact, you should never type this much code without testing it. This is a terrible idea. But luckily, I have the solutions in this solutions folder that actually work. So there's that. So that's the good news to this saga. So please work. So we have app.js. We're going to have our operators. Maybe if I escape the minus sign, maybe that's why. I don't know. I am going to look into that because it bothers me too. But we're just going to do addition for now. We're going to say the min is 1 and the max is 20. No, 10, yeah, we'll do 20. All right. That did not work. So there is clearly a problem. Oh, I put in, oh, it did. Thank you. Because I was about to go deep into debugging operators. Oh, now we're all out of ideas, aren't we? Oh, you should probably call your application like this, like, quiz.run flags.
Oh, yeah. Come on.
That's step 1 of programming is calling the thing you just spent way too much time writing. Oh, and yes, I should obviously not do that and do quiz.start. Perfect. We're getting so close. Reference error operators not defined. Yes, I need a comma here. This is really sad. Oh, wait, here. You also got to call this guy, you know, display quiz. Oh, and maybe not. Hey. So hopefully I'm going to enter something and I got it right. I do know how to add. So I'll run it again, and this time I'm going to type in something wrong, and it says it's wrong, and it tells me the output. So that was super fun. Always remember to call your functions is I think the moral of that story. All right. So now that so that's just you know, a brief introduction, maybe not brief, but an introduction nonetheless to two modules. One is Inquire, and the second is Yarg. Thank you, Yargs. I'm glad somebody's paying attention because I am not. So back to the slides. Don't know if you forgot about those. So back to the slides. So what we really did was just took care of the first two slides here, which are command line arguments, and you know, understanding how to build, you know, these CLIs. You know, instead of having to do all the work ourselves here with process argv, we were able to use Yargs and Inquire to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, right? I mean, our files didn't really turn into be, you know, too long. I mean, 60 lines of code, I got a lot of spacing in there as well. So less than 60 lines of code, we created a math quiz that's able to prompt you over and over. And I think the solution that I'm gonna upload is even a little bit more robust than this one. So that will give you a little bit more information too.
Okay.
Yes?
So that module is just available
It's available on NPM, so you would need to install it using like npm install. So like you saw, I did npm install save. I did npm install inquire save. That installed it into my node modules folder, which is located here. And so that's how I'm able to use and access that module. When I upload it to GitHub, I don't upload the node modules. I only upload the package.json. So you would need to do npm install inside of that app, and that'll just install it for you so that you can run it. But if you have any questions or errors, just let me know. So the second half of the lecture is APIs. Like I said, Albert, I did a good job of you know, covering this last week, because you, like I said, you worked with his messages API to make a request and get back a response. So hopefully a lot of this is just a, you know, a quick run through, but I do want to just have some slides on this, especially since this is your midterm and your lab today. So APIs are a huge part of the web nowadays, right? They're application programming interfaces. A lot of companies have APIs. GitHub has an API. You can make get and post requests and put requests, and you can do different things through that API. You can get data. You can you know, create a user. You can update that user's name, or then you could even delete that user, right? That's all what these get, post, and put requests are asking of you when you're interacting with different APIs. All of the APIs center around this request response lifecycle. So you're making a request to some resource. In the case of your homework, you were making a request to Albert's server, and his server was in turn interpreting that request and returning you a response with those messages and those hashes, right? You were working with that. So that's really all that we mean by this request response lifecycle. You send a request out, and there's data that comes back. If you break it down and you want to look at those things, you know, this is just sort of visual representation. Typically, when you send a request out, you hit a URL. You have a method. That method's get, post, put, deletes. Sometimes you might have headers. A lot of times, if you're doing authentication, you're expected to have certain authentication headers. In there, a user agent is actually a popular header. And then depending on your request, if it's a post or put request, you're probably gonna have a body. If you're just doing a get request, you're not gonna have a body because you're just asking for data to come back. And in the response, you're gonna have a status code. We looked at status codes a couple of weeks ago, right? You guys were filtering out 200s or 300s versus 400s and 500s. Those are status codes from the response. And then you also have a body coming back, especially last week. You had that hashes and messages coming back from the messages.json. And so last week you definitely learned about JSON, right? JSON's really no different than your JavaScript objects. It's just a string version of those objects, right? You can stringify your object, and when you stringify your object by doing json.stringify_object, you turn it into this JSON, right? And that's where all you're seeing is some extra quotations around your curly braces. If you parse your JSON, you can do a json.parse. You can parse the JSON, and that will turn it into a JavaScript object. So really, you know, don't be overwhelmed by JSON. They're just like JavaScript objects. In fact, they are. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So very straightforward. And then hopefully this picture, you know, I crafted it myself, so it's beautiful, right? You know, this picture is sort of giving us an idea of where we're going. You know, right now we have Node, and you know, we're going to be working with Node today to you know, create our modules or our server or our applications, right? And in your midterm and into the lab today, we're going to make an external request to an API. We're going to make some GET requests. Yes.
Sorry, I'm very sure waited, but then in Vue.js, can you also make API calls?
Some API calls can be made in Vue.js. Some cannot. It depends on what the request, like those requests that require authentication headers, I believe the browser does not allow. There are some requests that don't allow because the limitations on the different browsers. Because when you're in Vue.js, you can actually use the browser and an inspect element, and you can manipulate, you know, cookies and headers. And because you have that full manipulation inside the browser, they obviously would make it very easy to start hacking things. So there's a lot of GET requests from inside that mostly you can make GET requests. That's very simple. But when you're talking about making POST requests, that's where you get into a very gray area. And so you want to pass that to your server anyway, especially if you're passing user credentials, right? You don't want the user credentials to be this, for somebody to look at the request response and be like, oh, I know your password now, right? It's very difficult to do this kind of encryption. And we'll talk about that when we get to the front end and why we can't make some of those push requests in there. Yes?
This might be a few weeks late, but would you guys ever like teach React in the future?
You know, the truth is we would love to teach more of these things, especially more different front-end frameworks, but the class is only limited to once per semester. And so we are once per calendar year at CSULA. It's just the actual limitations based on the school. So unfortunately, we just have to pick one framework and go with it. Okay, so back to the picture. So you're going to have a Node application. That's going to be your modules or server or whatnot. Today we're going to be making an external request to an API. And instead of having a front end, since you don't know anything about Vue just yet, that's where we're going to be displaying just like we were on our terminal. So we're going to use our terminal as sort of our front end, that piece of the puzzle today. And right now there's no database, so we don't have to worry about that guy. So we're just going to be making these API calls. We're going to return it to our terminal so that the user can interact with whatever information that they've asked for. And then maybe they want to make some sort of selection back, and that, you know, just keeps coming back and forth in sort of this L-shaped, you know, message getting and putting cycle there. I included this just to help you guys out so that you had a reference point. Some very basic NPM commands. So npm init, that's going to assist you in creating your package.json. You saw me do that. I'm going to do it again here in a second. npm install will install all the modules already inside of a package.json. So when I upload these modules onto GitHub, I am not going to upload the node modules folder for many reasons, because if I just open this one folder, you can see how many things are inside there. There's 200 and some plus files. I'm not going to do that. It's actually a bad practice. I actually have a git ignore file, which prevents me from doing that. So what you want to do is npm install. That's why you give Albert and I your package.json. We do not want your node modules folder. Please don't do that. I don't want to download that, all right? That's crazy. It's too big. So just give me your package.json. I can run npm install if I need to. and we can go from there. If you want to save the module to your package.json, you save. If you've made a typo, I do it all the time, use uninstall and then use save, and that will just remove it right out. So you can install something accidentally and then be like, my bad, let me uninstall that. Yes?
If we wanted to check what packages we have installed, we have to go into the package.json file and check the dependencies.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
First, why isn't everything a web API? Why do we have to put things in our computers? Can't we just?
There's all sorts of APIs, right? Like, you know, like if JavaScript has an API itself, right? Any method on arrays or objects, that's the application programming interface for that language, right? So we're just looking at web APIs today. So to answer your question, all right.
My question was that as in npm install, if you're installing a package.
Mm-hmm. We're using, okay, go ahead.
What I'm saying is that we have web APIs. Why would we ever worry about packages? Whatever I need done, I can just make a request, send a packet to some kind of a server, they do everything for me.
Right.
Send me the
But here we are programming this server.
So,
you would have to make all the requests.
So, yeah.
It's a lot more requests, and the other server does it.
Well, so here's, so again,
multiple requests for different packages, not because there are dependencies, different dependencies for each dependency. So, but you have to still call those individual dependencies. And in that case, the different dependencies, that means that the other server configuration would have to make those requests.
So what you just said is very good, because you have taken the time to familiarize yourself how this packages work. I'm trying to save people from being what you are.
I just answered your question.
Yes, you did, but you did and you didn't. But my point is that I'm saying web API oriented programming is package oriented.
well, the packages are, the packages are just helping us shortcut some, like, you know, it's like, why reinvent the wheel, right? Like, could I personally sit down and have written the entire solution to parsing out these quizzes today? Yeah, I could. That wouldn't have taken me too long. If I'd asked you guys to do it, it would have taken, you know, a significant amount of time because you're not as familiar with Node and all that. But why do I want to reinvent that wheel, right? Why do I want to parse all these arguments when I can use a library that is successful and proven to do that for me? So those are the packages, right? Those are helping us do things in simple tasks that we're trying to achieve. But web APIs, what we're talking about web APIs is we're saying like, well, you know, hey, like I'm a huge, you know, this is actually true. I'm a huge Fortnite fan, right? Like I love the game Fortnite. I play all the time. I don't know if you guys play Fortnite.
My brother does.
Okay, great. I love Fortnite, right? I love to keep up my stats on Fortnite. Like I'm so obsessed with like looking at my stats on Fortnite. Well, there's no magical package in NPM for me to look at my Fortnite stats, right? Like the only way to do that is I have to interact with the Epic, which is the maker of Fortnite, and they have a server. And if I log into their server, I authenticate as myself. I can then use their API to start looking at my Fortnite stats. I can see like how many games I played, how many games I've won, you know, what are my kills versus my death ratio, right? So I'm going to use that API to get that information. And maybe there's other Fortnite fans out there. You know, maybe there's a lot of people in class that are like, I want to do that too now. Well, now I can write a Node package where all they have to do is just maybe type in their username and password, and I just like simply give them all that myself, everything they want. And they don't really do any work, right? They're just using a service that I've provided. I've done all the work of making GET requests all behind the scenes. And so hopefully the demo that I show you today kind of hints at that and kind of hints at using the web API. You as a developer, it certainly makes sense, right? You're like, well, I can make all these requests myself. But it's for people who are less developer that they're trying to just use a CLI and say like, hey, you know, here's my username and here's my password. And that's all they want to do. They don't know how to develop anything. They just want to see their stats, right? So you're just helping them. That's your job.
We take one for humanity.
You're taking one for the team. Everybody's taking one for the team in here. Exactly. So I just include this NPM basics, and then reading and references, chapter 18 from the book, and then, you know, chapter, or this website, if you're really wanting to understand and get like a very, very detailed understanding of APIs, I would highly recommend this, especially, you know, maybe you're having more questions. I take a look at this URL. It's very clearly written. You know, some of my slides, these images here came from that website, which is why I referenced it. It's a very, you know, clear and concise introduction to APIs and how to interact with them. So with that being said, we have another demo. God, we're running out of time. This is depressing. Fuck, I know. I know you want me to keep talking so there's no lab, right? That's not true though. I promise. Okay, so this is an API. This is a very small API. It's called Deck of Cards, and you know, it just has a bunch of GET requests, right? All this API does is it gives you this virtual deck of cards. You can shuffle the cards, you can draw some cards, you can reshuffle the cards, you could get a new deck, you could do a lot of other things down at the bottom here. We're not gonna get into all this, but we're gonna write a small, we're gonna write a custom node module that wraps this API. And then we're going to write a CLI to interact with the node module that we just wrote. So hopefully that sounds familiar, because that's like literally what your midterm is. So there's, you know, that. Not with deck of cards though, because that would be too easy.
Are we going to do with weather?
Huh?
With weather?
There's a lot of APIs to choose from. So if you're really into the weather, you know, go for it. I do not care. Like, not judging. You know, you can be in the you can. There's some, you know, I even suggested a Star Wars API. So whatever you want. So I have this cards app, and I have the two files here. We have app and we have CLI. So I'm going to go back into my cards app here. Whoops, CD. Okay, yeah, perfect, great. And you can, as you can see, if I list everything in here, there's no package.json. So spoiler alert, npm in it. And so we're just going to say, sure, the description is a, I don't know, draw and play with cards. I don't know. Entry, it already filled it out for me. App.js, no test, no get. Author, sure, I'll put myself. And MIT. And then so it asked me that right, great. Obviously, we're going to be using yargs because that's what we've already started the day with. So I'm going to do npm install -- save yargs. Okay. And then I got a little ahead of myself, because actually what we want to do first is we want to build this custom node module called Deck of Cards. So we're building a module that we're going to eventually use in our command line application. But there's also, you know, so I'm going to cd into Deck of Cards. And also I'm going to do npm init again, because I'm building a node module. It definitely needs to have a package.json. It's called Deck of Cards. Description is wrapper for Deck of Cards API. Entry point is the index. All right. So this is great. So now I have a module. So this is going to be my my custom module for wrapping the Deck of Cards API, right? So like I said, you're going to be in your midterm. You're going to be picking an API. You're going to write a custom node module that wraps that API. So I'm inside my index file. I cheated a little bit, and I already made this config.json. And that's because sometimes you want to have configurations separated. Like I said, I really like to do separation of concerns. And I'm putting my URL in my configuration.
I just had a question about like installing some new dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
Are we gonna learn how to use Bower in order to like?
Bower is a front-end dependency manager. I don't, I mean, you might be able to use it for Node. The only two ones I don't think you can, honestly, because I'm only really familiar with NPM and Yarn. Yarn is the substitute to NPM, and Bower manages, I know, your front-end dependencies. I've only ever seen it used for front-end dependencies. I could research if you could use it for Node, but I have never encountered that yet, so. So I put my URL in here. And the reason why I did that is because, you know, my API, you know, here, you know, we're going to be using the same base URL over and over again. And a lot of times, you know, your configurations are a lot more robust than this. It's just really to give you an idea that, you know, you might want to separate your concerns for configurations or things that you constantly use or are constants in your program. You could put them in a configurations file. You don't have to, just, you know, you've seen how I am with my separations. So I'm going to require in my config file, and since it's JavaScript and since it's JSON, you know, it's very simple to just require in any kind of JSON file. So I can just do require dot config, and it understands. I don't even need to type in JSON. It just understands that that's what I'm asking for. Yes. You do not have to export JSON.
Because I've seen like examples where like they export objects.
You can. You don't have to export JSON. You could export JSON. You don't have, but you don't have to. If it was a JavaScript file, you would then need to export it. If it's a .js, you would do a module.exports. If it's a JSON, you don't have to. And I know Albert taught you request. It's a great module, but I prefer super agent. Not, you know. Not digging. Request is great. Honestly, it is more popular than super agent. I just prefer super agent. It's pretty easy to use in whatever you choose to use in your midterm. Fine by me. You know, you want to use request, great. You want to use super agent, great. You want to use something completely different, go for it. I do not care, honestly. And so what we kind of do is we're not going to create a wrapper for this entire API because we don't have time, and I am running very short on time at the moment. So we're going to wrap two of the two methods. We're going to wrap getting a new deck of cards, and we're going to wrap drawing a card from that deck. Okay. So you can see here, it even gives you this API, you know, shuffle the cards. This actually comes in as you know, this guy right here, or we're going to draw a new card right there. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to export our functions because we're a Node module, and we're going to expect people to eventually you know, use our module. So we're going to do this, and we're going to export this particular function here, right? So then I'm going to use super agent, and super agent is a lot like request, so it's not like you're learning something too crazy here. You know, request, you had some sort of method, right? You have a thing, we're making a get method, right? We're going to make a get call. These are all gets. They're not posts, puts, or deletes. We're going to make a get call, and we're going to use our config URL, which we already have magically in here. So we're going to be using that URL right there. That's what config URL means.
Did you already install Super?
I don't think I did yet. Thank you. Nope, I haven't. That would have been fun. They would have told me though. -- save super agent deck of cards, perfect, thank you. And we have this thing here. So all I have is here I have just the API URL. So I need everything from out the API URL. So that guy. Right. And so we're just going to be working with one deck right now. To make things easier on us, that's all we're going to do. And so then I want to do the same thing with drawing a card. Exports, draw. And that is going to be super agent.get, yeah. This, we're going to copy most of that, but we're going to look at the draw API right here, which is that. Okay. Boom. All right. So this is sort of just a first pass because this doesn't make any sense just yet, right? Like we have some things that we really need to address, right? It's not that simple. That would be ludicrous. First thing is, you know, this is a variable and this is a variable. Shuffle is, you know, optional. So, you know, maybe I don't want a shuffle deck. You know, maybe I literally brought a brand new pack of cards. If you've ever bought a brand new pack of cards, you know, the first card in the deck is the Ace of Spades. Or if you don't, now you do. So if shuffle is true, then we want to do that. Otherwise, copy that guy, put that here. Boom. New.
Then don't you have to shuffle it after you knew it up?
Huh?
Don't you have to shuffle it after you knew it?
Maybe. I mean, depends on what you want to do. The idea behind your wrapper is it should make no assumptions about what the user wants. Like, if the user wants a fresh deck of cards, you got to give them a fresh deck of cards. Like, it's not your job to be like, I'm gonna shuffle this for you. Like, your wrapper makes no assumptions. You're just literally wrapping the API to make it easy for the user to say, give me a fresh deck shuffled, or give me a fresh deck, or give me a deck that's shuffled. And if I read my API here, it says, you know, blah, 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 blah. Blackjack typically uses 6 decks. The default is 1. It tells me that in my API. So if I just do some reading, I don't actually need to do this because it says the default is 1. Why would I, you know, do that? It says, hey, if you ask me for a deck, I'm going to give you just one deck of cards. And so all we're going to deal with is 1 deck right now. All right. And so now we can see, well, we need to really, we have to, if we were trying to draw a card from a deck, after we've gotten a deck, you know, you have to have a deck of cards first before you can draw cards. We need to pass a deck ID. So obviously, you know, we need a deck ID. And so now we can replace that with a dynamic variable that says deck ID, right? Great. And now the user wants to the user should be responsible for telling us how many cards they want. We can't just say, well, I'm only gonna ever give you 2 cards. So we need an in, and now we need to replace that with a variable that says in, right? So now this is a lot more dynamic. We have a deck and a deck ID. Great. But me, personally, I like to do, you know, to me, this is just looks like all I did is copy and paste 100 things, right? You saw me copy and paste super agent.get 100 times. So personally, I can't take it. I have to write a wrapper around that. Sorry. So we're going to call commands. And so we're going to make our lives a little bit more easier, where we get rid of this and put this up here. And we're going to change this into commands. And then we can start using it because I said this was a, if it says I said this was a promise library, or if I didn't, it's a promise library. So, and we need to return our promise. So instead of having to copy and paste this thing, which is actually the full thing, like this is what we would really have to do if we were actually doing this, right? Instead of having that all over our code, we only do that one time, right? So now I'm returning a promise of super agent getting some commands, and now I can replace all these with my fetch wrapper, and then I can start deleting everything. I don't need this config URL anymore because it's already there. So the command is literally just that. So hopefully that looks a little bit cleaner, and hopefully that makes sense as to why I did that. So what I've done is I looked at this API, and I said I want to make it really easy for users to be able to get a deck of cards, get that deck shuffled if they want to get that deck, and then draw cards from that deck, right? That's all I've done here. There are more methods that we could wrap, but we're only going to wrap these two because it's all you actually need for the lab today. Okay, does anybody not understand what is happening? Yes?
So then we do to provide data into some kind of function, so response. So response is your input.
Mm-hmm.
Then you learn the function. You use the lambda expression that I can see the function. What do you return with that?
Where? Oh, if you don't use any, it's an implicit return.
Oh, it's return? Oh,
Yeah, yeah. If you just use arrow and then response to a body, it will implicitly return. It's just implicit return. If you need to take no other action other than returning, then you can do that. If you were to needing to take some other action, like, you know, something else, like you wanted to say, like, I don't know, const x equals 1, then you would have to do this, right? Because you're adding more JavaScript. But if you just have a very simple implicit return here, and you're just going to return whatever you get, it's implicit. Awesome. Mm-hmm. All right, so now we have this custom node module. It's very, very small. So hopefully it's going to be very, very easy to use. That's kind of the idea. And again, I typed way too much code without testing. That's great. And so now I need to, you know, I need to use my, I want to get, you know, I'm writing this CLI, and I want to get my deck of cards. I just wrote a custom module, right? I need to use my custom module now. That would be silly if I didn't. So NPM allows you to install your custom modules locally. You don't have to just publish it to NPM. If you do NPM install, and make sure you're in the directory that you want to be in. So if you go to your cards app, right here I'm in cards app. I want to install the module in this location. So I can do npm install. I can go to the file path. I know that my deck of cards application is one out of cards app. I know it's called deck of cards. And now it has installed. I don't think I did a save, so I don't believe that's in my package.json. Oh, well, that worked out well for me. All right, that worked, cool. So you can see now that it's in my package.json. You can see the dependency is a little bit different because it's saying that it's a file. So the package.json, when it goes to install this, it's going to be looking for this file path here. So now I have my cards, have my deck of cards module that I wrote in my cards application. So I'm going to cheat because we're running on time and copy that. It's fun when you've already written it. Oh, well, that's awkward. because that is the solution. So get that out of there. So this is using, I'm going to walk us through this. I'm just saving myself the time of typing the solution to this particular thing here, since we only have about 30 minutes left. This is again using yargs. This time from yargs, we're using the command function. So instead, we're not using options, right? You can see there is a use of options in there, but instead we're doing usage and then dot commands. And that's just a little different when we do this. So if I do, let me clear this out, and I do node app help. Whoops. Is that not saved? Hello? Oh, CLI. Duh. Node CLI help. So it's just a little different. Instead of doing the dash dash, I'm able to just use the word as is. So you can see here it says commands, and it says CLI draw, and then it's telling me that it draws a card from the deck. And inside of this command function, we have a description, draws a card from a deck. And the command allows two different functions. One is called a builder function, so that you can build on top of your command. And so what we're trying to build on top of our command is, do I want to shuffle my deck? And if I do, or if I don't, how many cards do I want to draw from that deck, right? So we just created the module that allows us to do both of those things. So that's neat. And so I can get some more information on my, so if I do node, CLI, draw, help maybe? Yes. So if I do node CLI draw help and I get the help commands from draw, you can see here that it prints out these options that I'm allowing, which is, you know, a Boolean to shuffle the deck or not, and the number of cards in which I want to draw. Close my solutions, close that. So then we need to implement some of this into running out of time. We need to implement this solution into our thing. So first we're going to require in our module. So we installed our module, so we can say cards equals require deck of cards, right? We can bring that in. And inside of our module, we said, also inside the command module, we can say, how do we want to handle this command? When somebody uses the draw command, what is it we want to actually do with that command, right? So as soon as somebody uses it, we want to call this function here. We want to call app.draw, and we're going to pass in the arguments of shuffle and number, okay? So we clearly need a function called draw. That's the first one. And draw is going to take, you know, the two arguments we just said, shuffle and number. And maybe we want to just default that number to 1. You know, we don't want to draw 0 cards. That would be unhelpful. So if the user specifies no number, then we are going to draw 1 card for them. And so we just wrote our module, so hopefully we understand how to interact with our module, right? I just wrote it, I should know how to use it. And so I do know how to use it, so I can say cards.deck, right? That's going to fetch a deck. I said when I wrote that I could pass in a flag to shuffle that. Then I wrote a thing called, you know, draw a card. And so when I get my response back from my deck, I can then, you know, use my method, which was draw, to get the deck. And I said I needed to pass in the deck ID. And then I'm going to pass in the number of cards that I want to draw. Yeah.
Where do you get the deck ID
From the response.
So maybe.
So you can see that the response right here, the sample response from getting a deck has a deck ID from that API. So we know that if this response is successful, we are going to in fact get a deck ID back. So we know that we're going to get a deck, and that's an object that has a deck ID. I don't know what that was. And then we're going to get a result after we draw the cards, right? And it is, we'll just console.log that result. And then we need to export this. So module exports. You can also export thing like this, equals. So our CLI brings in our app. That's this file here. Inside of our app, we exported this function called draw. So if we say app.draw and pass in these numbers, ideally, if I typed everything right, this will work. Really have no idea again. So node CLI, this time I'm not going to shuffle the deck, and I'm going to draw 2 cards. That did not work. That's great. Display? What? Oh, no, that was the other one. I should, no, call app.draw. Let's see if I have messed something up. So catch error, console.log error. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That would obviously help me. Hey, we did it. I just typed it right. I did all that in one go minus the draw part. So as I said, if you don't shuffle a deck, the first card in the deck is the ace of spades, and then the second card in the deck is the 2 of spades. It goes upward. And so if we were to do all, so I did not shuffle this deck, right? I did not pass in to shuffle the deck, so it did not shuffle the deck. So this time I'm going to, hey, say I want to shuffle the deck, true, and still draw me 2 cards. And this time I have 2 random cards. You can see there, this is suit clubs 5, suit spades, whatever. So I could form, now that I know what my response looks like, I could from, I don't think you can display the, not the terminal.
No, not the terminal, yeah.
Oh, no. So I could loop through my result.cards, and I could pretty print this a little bit better. And I could just say, hey, console.log, card.value of card.suit. Okay.
Don't you have 2 cards?
Oh yeah, I do. That's why we're looping. Result.cards is not a function. Result. Oh, for each. There we go. All right, so there you can see it's a little bit cleaner, right? Now it's actually easy to see that I have the king of hearts and the queen of spades. And I can keep doing this, and I have now 4 of hearts, 2 of diamonds, right? I'm just drawing 2 random cards. I could, increase that to 5, and now I have these 5 random cards. So does that make sense? I know I went through that a little bit fast because we're short on time. Okay. Well, my deck. So this deck of cards here is the node module, right? And then this is my CLI that I'm interacting with my node module.
2 different modules.
Well, one's a node module and one's an application. Yeah. All right. So I know we're short on time. I know that last part was super quick. I will extend the lab to midnight.
Today?
Yeah, it was meant to be done in an hour, so that's a lot of hours.
Well, we gotta,
That's why you're all here today.
well, we gotta.
I have work too. I have to grade 125 labs too. I have to prepare for these too. I work 50 hours. I mean. Also, you still have like 45 minutes of lab left technically. So, I mean, you're gonna leave now? Well, let's just look at the lab real quick. Can we just look at it? Can we just take a peek before we all go crazy? All right. So we've already done a lot of work. I broke this. You know I like to break things down. There's a lot of bullet points because I'm very crazy like that. I know. So we've already done a lot of the work, right? You can use everything that I will upload these files, the Node module app I just wrote. You don't even need to make any changes to that file, right? Like I'm not asking you to write any more functions that file. I will literally upload it and you have it for free. It's already done for you. I've literally done like a third of your lab for you, right? Like that's crazy. So anyway. So we're going to create a command on the CLI called play, right? And everybody's going to run it by typing node CLI play. So this command requires no options. So that's already infinitely easier than that command right there, right? You don't even need all of that. That's all you really need on your play command, right? My God, that's a hint. That's crazy. So that should be very easy, right? Like you're literally typing like 3 key value pairs, okay, for the first bullet point. Second bullet point is it automatically shuffle and draws 5 cards. Well, I've already kind of done that for you, right? I've already written the method to shuffle a deck and draw cards. Hopefully you got that done. So pretty much 1 and 2 are done. Here's where we get a little bit crazy. You're going to prompt the user and you're going to allow them to throw up to 4 cards away. So you're going to draw 5 cards for them. You're going to display these 5 cards for them. They are going to be able to select up to 4. They cannot throw 5 away, but up to 4 cards away. They can just throw them away. And once they throw them away, you're going to replace them with 4 cards, or however many they choose. If they throw 2 cards away, you replace it with 2 cards. If they throw 1 card away, you replace it with 1 card. If they throw no cards away, you don't replace it. But you probably should do some replacing because I'm going to test the replacing part. And they need to replace it from the same deck, right? I should not see somebody that has 2 ace of spades in their hands, because that's crazy. That's a new deck of cards, right? So use the same deck. We already know the deck ID, so we know we can draw from that same deck. All right, and then you're going to print the new hand and the number of cards remaining in the deck. Here's the example output. So if I go into here, solutions, cards app, so node, CLI, play. So I was going to have you print the little icons out too, but then I thought that would be a little much. So I didn't ask for that. But I did that already. So if you really want to, go for it. Not required. You can just have ace of diamonds, ace of jack of wood. So here I have 5 cards, and I have this selector function. We learned about inquire. I said inquire has prompts such as checkboxes. This kind of looks like a checkbox. Maybe you should investigate that particular function to see if it works for you. It works for me. So I can just come down here and I'm just selecting by pressing my space bar, just going up and down, selecting by pressing my space bar. This is, you guys think I did a lot of work here. I didn't, because I used Inquire. So, you know, I'm gonna throw away 3 cards because I have 2 5s, you know, maybe I'll get a third 5 and I'll win my poker game. So you can see here, now I have new cards. I didn't print out the fancy suits in this one, but you can see I have these new cards. I have 5 5. I kept my 2 5s. You can see the cards that I threw away, and you can see that I have 44 cards remaining in the deck. So you know I picked from the same deck. I didn't pick from a fresh deck. Otherwise, I'd have 49 cards remaining, right? So I threw away 3. There was initial 5, so that's, you know, 8 minus 52 is 44. It's not too bad, right?
Yeah, I just want to play cards.
I mean, right, everybody, so we could just all play cards. It's not like I said build a poker game. Are there any questions? Huh? Tomorrow night still? I've done 1 and 2. What about if I help you do number 3 and it's still due tonight? I was gonna help you do number 3. Okay.
Is this like a haggling class?
I know. That's what I want to know. Tomorrow night, Monday night. All right. I'm not going to help you do number 3, but it can be due Monday night at 11:59 p.m. There is still approximately 30 minutes left in lab. I am tired. I know you guys are all tired. I appreciate you coming. I'm going to send grades out now. I need to unplug to do that and close the Zoom because it's private. And one more thing before, if you have questions, hang on, one question. Here. If you have questions and you need to speak to me, especially after I give you your grade, please go to this URL and just enter your name, because grades are private and I can't have a line of people here and wanting to know why somebody got a grade and now you know somebody else's grade, right? It is a privacy concern. I want to speak to people one-on-one. So if your question is about a grade or anything else that you need to speak to me one-on-one about, or Albert one-on-one about, just add your name to the queue. It's just Albert's website /CS422. You can put your name. These will be in order here. And I can pop your name off the queue. But I'm going to go ahead and send out grades. I'm sure this is going to fill up. Can't wait. But I'm going to unplug and stop Zoom now. Albert.
But this is what email I was telling you about.
222. Okay, yeah. So send me